Yep.
Great. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 18th show and tell for the Buckinghamshire Council projects to design and build a website for a new local authority. We've done quite a few of these before, and you may have noticed that I'm starting this one instead of Ben, who usually does that. So that's because Ben was not able to join today. So you might have to listen to me a bit more this time around. But I'll try to say exactly the same things that Ben says when going through these initial slides. So as you all know, we do these show and tells every third week. We hold them so that we can show everyone what we're doing and explain what we're thinking, what's coming next, and give everyone the opportunity to ask some questions and give feedback on what we're doing. We're trying to work in an agile way. We're trying to do a user-centered way of working. Working in very small iterations, trying to build something with every sprint, every 3-week cycle. I'm trying to do some research every time, and then also trying to share some learnings with everyone. Nothing new, we've shown this before, but we kind of keep reminding ourselves that that's the way we want to work. Something quite exciting for this particular show and tell is that we have a new vision statement. So the previous vision was somewhat outdated because it was addressing the initial stage of the project up to the 1st of April, when we needed to really quickly launch a new website. But now we gave ourselves a slightly grander vision, if you will, and it goes like this. So we will give our residents more free time by making everything they do with the council faster and easier. Now, it seems simpler, but actually it's quite an interesting one because it's much broader, it's much more far-reaching, right? It's not just about the interaction on the website. What we're implying here is that actually what people do on the website is connected to all the other things. One of them being the customer service center, for example. And obviously when you provide more information, more accurate information online, that has impact on all the other aspects of council services. So one of the things we would now like to figure out as the next step for this vision of ours is how can we actually measure that? How can we make that more tangible? How can we make sure that, we know that if we make a change on the websites, how do we know then how does that impact all the other interactions that residents have with the council? So that's something we want to think about over the next 3 weeks or so. So what else have we done in the last 3 weeks? Actually, this slide is not that dissimilar to the one we showed 3 weeks ago. There are still a number of work streams in progress that we've been doing for a while. So one of the things is the CRM and resident data discovery, which we are just wrapping up, and we're going to talk about that in more detail. There's still work going on around policy and strategy pages. There's stuff around alerts, notifications, schema.org tagging, family information services content as well. So that's another big one. And there's all sorts of other stuff which is more in a support mode. So we're still making additional accessibility fixes, still some fixes on the job site and the contacts and complaints forms. So this is all ongoing work. So quite a lot of different work streams, and we're going to present just a couple of them in more detail in the following slides. So first of all, I would like to talk about the resident data and access discovery, as we call it, which essentially is a discovery around the council's customer service centers and the systems they use. So we're talking a lot about the CRM systems in this case, so the customer relationship management systems. To reiterate what the focus of the discovery is about, so it's about understanding the residents and the residents' needs when interacting with the council, and also the customer service centers and their needs. So on one hand, it's about ensuring we have tools and processes for a modern customer service center. On the other hand, it's about finding opportunities to enable our citizens to do more online. Now, what have we done over the last 3 weeks to kind of achieve that, or get towards that goal? So we've done more interviews with residents and staff. We did quite a lot of analysis of data that was available from various call centers, trying to understand what kind of calls are more common. Is there any variation across service centers, etc., etc. We tried and we did map some customer journeys We are aware that there's big variation possible in all the different things people ask about, but we mapped out a few example journeys that will help us identify the main pain points and understand the customer needs better. We mapped a variety of systems and dependencies, trying to understand what it might take for us to switch over from one system to another, or if we want to, for example, move all the service centers to one system, what kind of complexities might be involved. We did another workshop, so we held an opportunities workshop to understand opportunities for what might come up next. And right now we're just wrapping all that up and writing up a report with some key recommendations that come from all of that work. So just to give you a few examples of the kind of things we were working on. So one of the things I said, we were looking at the call data. One of the things that interests us quite a lot is what kind of inquiries are most common. It so happens that about a quarter of all the calls are about waste and a few other high volume inquiries, so bus pass inquiries or registering births or council tax. So those are all high volume inquiries. And what that means for us and how that helps us is that we can then focus our efforts on those inquiries that are a bit more common, so we can make more impact if we change the journey in some way that enables residents to do more online, for example. We also mapped a few customer journeys with pain points, and I'm going to ask Lawrence to say a few words about that.
Cool, thank you. Yes, so we've been submitted 3 different customer journeys. As you can see, one example is there. They're based on the interviews that we've been doing, both with residents and also staff members, to try to sort of triangulate both perspectives, but really try to focus these journeys on the resident experience. So you can see there that all of the customer steps are from a customer's perspective. And then in addition to that, adding the back-end systems that they interact with, trying to see how many times they interact with a council system, perhaps all the different remnants of data that are left on council systems as a result of that process. And then at the bottom in pink, though, we've got the pain points. These are, to understand what the issues are, both from a resident's perspective, like what are the things that hold a resident back or kind of maybe frustrate a resident, but also what are the difficulties or problems that are faced by customer centre staff. So for example, there you can see the one that's highlighted on the left is duplication of records if someone forgets their password, for example, which then means that there's potentially 2 records to choose from when you're trying to assign and associate a record. And then on the other side, there's the customer has to wait on the line if they get transferred. So different pain points for different perspectives. Those pain points then kind of have been used to frame some of the opportunities that I believe Boris will talk about later. So I think that's enough for that. Now I think I'm handing over to Nick to talk about the systems.
Yeah, hi. So early on, we spoke to residents and customer service staff and began to map out what were the journeys and the relationships between who spoke to who. And then after getting an understanding of what the processes were, we started to look at where the data was recorded between the different systems, who interacts with those systems, and which where data is transferred between them. Where do you have a read-only view of something? Where can a resident directly update something themselves in a self-service way without going through a customer service centre? And we've got, at the moment, we're sort of building 3 diagrams that are like this for Aylesbury Vale, for the South Bucks and Chiltern area, and for Wickham area. And they're revealing very different shapes. They're generated diagrams at the moment, so the 3 different diagrams are massively different shape because of the different relationships there that are between the systems, and it's just unveiling generally a different structure of organisation necessitated by the different products that have been sold and contracts that have come along with varying understandings and assumptions about how systems will talk to each other. This one for Aylesbury Vale is possibly the hardest to read because there are a lot of little notes there about exactly what the details of the different integrations are, but we're in the process of talking to people and refining these, so hope to have something that is directly comparable between the different areas and between the old county council as well when we're done. And I don't know who's going next.
I think I'm going next again. Thank you, Nick. As Lawrence mentioned, we were talking a bit about opportunities. So we held a workshop, I think it was actually this week, where we explored opportunity areas. So these are quite high-level opportunity areas for service improvement, and we were basically discussing this with people from various service centers and others involved in this work. So just to read out a few things that we were talking about. So we were talking about maybe making the messaging across interactions more consistent, so across the different IVRs, websites, etc. We're talking about unifying IT systems, so moving towards a single CRM or a single IVR system. We're talking about improving follow-up communications with residents. So those are all some of the points we talked about, and you can read more about that on the screen. Now, what we were particularly interested in is trying to understand when and how we can start working on these opportunity areas. And one tool that helped us do that is this matrix that you see on the screen, the impact effort matrix, where we were trying to understand which things might have more impact and which things might have less impact. And then on the other side, we were trying to understand which things might require more effort to get done versus others that might require less effort. So this helped us organize these different areas into what we call quick wins, or like things that can be done quite quickly and have a big impact, and then other things that are more like major projects that we know will take a long time to complete, but actually have a big impact as well. And then there's other work streams that may have somehow less impact, but still can get done with a meaningful amount of effort. So out of this kind of, it came out that some of the very early opportunity areas might be, for example, improving the follow-up communication with residents, or potentially to make the messaging across all interactions more consistent. Now, that may actually be more complicated than we initially assumed, so we're going to continue having conversations about that and try to understand what that all entails. At the same time, we know that moving towards a unified IT system is going to happen at some point over the next few years, and we really want to unpick how that can happen, right? So what exactly are the steps that need to happen in that major project towards that? As Nick showed in the previous page, all the integrations that are already in place in all the various systems are quite intricate. So we realize that's going to be a complex project. And as I mentioned, right now we're compiling a report with recommendations. So these are just example slides from that report, and we're going to share that once we're done with the relevant people. I assume that's going to be shared with everyone at some point. As I mentioned, like each of those areas on the previous slide, for example, is going to have a separate page here with a bit more detail about what exactly that means. Okay, now I'm going to hand over to David, who is a content designer that's actually recently joined our team. So you probably haven't seen him before, but he's done some excellent work on the content for the website in the last 3 weeks. David?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Boris, how do I control the slides?
You say next slide, please.
Okay. Okay, well, I'm going to talk about a card sorting exercise we prepared and published last week. And if you don't know what a card sorting exercise is, don't worry, because I'll get to that in a minute. Next slide, please. So to give you a little background, this exercise grew from a workshop between content designers working on the Bucks project, and we're planning the migration of content from the Family Information Service website across to the main Bucks website. During this meeting, we discussed the information architecture on the new Bucks site, and some of the challenges that lay ahead. These challenges include structuring and ordering the existing content in a way that will make sense to the most users, ensuring that the structure we come up with on the main Buck site is such that we can effectively migrate the FIS content into it, and also amalgamating content where there is duplication or overlap. Tom from Unbox prepared a very detailed content audit in Google Sheets, a very small portion of which you can see on the screen now. And this specifically covered areas where there was crossover and duplication with FIS content. And those areas on the main Buck site are culture and tourism, health, well-being and sports, and environment. During our discussion and our workshop, it became clear that ordering this content logically was going to be a big challenge and a large amount of work because there was duplication and overlap. And while we as content designers could spend days coming up with what we think might be the best solution, there's a risk that what we come up with may not make sense to users. We wanted a data-driven solution to provide guidance on how to structure the Buck's information architecture, and we decided that card sorting was the solution. Next slide, please. For anyone who's unfamiliar with card sorting, it's a technique used in content design in which a group of subjects are presented with a series of cards that represent different pieces of website content. They're then given an opportunity to place these cards into columns that group similar content in a way that makes sense. Then this allows content designers like me to work out how best to group and present content in a meaningful way that's useful to the biggest number of users. Card sorting exercises can either be closed, where the columns are predetermined by content designers and users move the content into those columns. But more useful are open card sorting exercises, where users create their own categories, and this helps us understand what makes most sense to them. And so we chose an open structure for our card sorting exercise. Next slide, please. We presented participants with a series of cards that represent content on the existing Buck site and asked users to create groups where they would logically place these cards. There are lots of providers out there who provide content or card sorting solutions, but we chose Optimal Workshop because it's got a very simple interface and is very easy to use. It's very friendly for users and leads them through the process very, very carefully and easily. And it features powerful tools in the back end to analyze the data we gather. To create the cards, we went back to Tom's original content audit and created cards primarily based on level 2 pages on the Buck site, but also with a selection of content pages from levels 3 and 4, just to add a bit of extra context. When choosing those cards, we had to come up with criteria, and to choose those cards, the criteria were that each card should represent a user's destination on the Buck site or a content page that might sit before the directory in the user's journey. We avoided content that should appear in the directory only, things like WizFizzFest event. And we avoided cards where the title alone might not mean much to users. And then if we added any explanation, it might skew the results. So we didn't have things like active Bucks, because we might have to say that's a public health initiative and that might encourage users to put it in a certain place. Optimal Workshop recommend between 40 and 60 cards for effective results, and we went with 47. Stuart Lawrence at Bucks kindly helped us prepare a cover email and distribute the test to 424 people last Friday, all of whom were volunteers as part of the Buckinghamshire Council website testing panel. Next slide, please. It's too early to close the exercise or draw too many conclusions at this stage, and we're going to run it for at least another week. But so far, 101 people have started the test and 50 people have completed it, which might sound disheartening, but that's about average for this sort of thing. Most users have taken around 13 minutes to complete the exercise. Others have spent almost an hour. I don't know how seriously to take the person who only spent 3 minutes 15 seconds, but it'll be interesting to see what they said. And we've had a total of 332 different categories created by users, with users on average creating about 6 categories each. So there's plenty to get our teeth into there. Next slide, please. When it comes to analysing the results, there are several tools in the back end of Optimal Workshop that will help us make sense of it. The first that's shown here is a similarity matrix. The numbers in the squares show where there's agreement between users on how to group content, with the darker blue squares showing where there is the most agreement. And then if you hover your mouse over the squares, you'll get these green lines that appear, which show the content types in question. So in this example, 82 participants agreed that green infrastructure and biodiversity should be grouped together. So this is one tool that's going to be helpful. And next slide, please. Another useful tool is a dendrogram, which may look daunting, but is a visual representation of where agreement has come from users on how content should be grouped. In the back end of Optimal Workshop, you can move your mouse along the lines to get more information on how users have grouped the content into particular categories. And again, this will be very useful when it comes to drawing up a final list of categories. Next slide, please. And one other tool that I find particularly useful is participant-centric analysis, which compares user responses and highlights the content groups most participants agree on, and also highlights other content groups that are relevant. So using a combination of the similarity matrix, the dendrogram, and the participant-centric analysis, we'll draw up a list of potential categories for content on the main Buck site, which will help us, eventually make the site make better sense to users, and will also guide our thinking when it comes to migrating or amalgamating content from the FIS website. Next slide, please. The test will run for at least another 7 days, and I'll paste the link into the group chat in a minute. Please feel free to share this link with anyone who might be able to help us out. And that's it from me.
Cool, thank you, David. That was excellent. I'm really looking forward to see what comes out of that exercise. As for next steps, so we're nearing the end of this show and tell. One of the things that Ben put together, which is great during the last couple of weeks, is this roadmap, which he has openly shared. So everyone can have access to this roadmap. You can see there are columns there about things that have already been done, so things that are live. There are things that we are working on now, and there's stuff that's coming up next and things that we are thinking about. Now, we would like to invite everyone openly to contribute to this roadmap if you want to. All you need to do is go on that link. You will need to create a Trello account of some sort if you want to leave comments on these cards. But everyone is invited to comment on them if you want to. So if you click on one of these cards, you get this interface where it allows you to post a comment and have a discussion about each of the topics. So I think, yeah, we'd be quite eager to hear from everyone what they think about the things that are coming up next. And more immediate next steps, we are going to wrap up the CRM discovery, share the reports and recommendations. We're going to complete some more content work on the family information services that David was talking about. We are going to have a better understanding of and timing of the different service reviews that are taking place and align our roadmap to that. Then we're going to also migrate content from a variety of old websites such as Care Advice Bucks and others. And one of the things that has come in just this week is a review on the accessibility of our website that was completed by the Short Trust. And we need to review that and possibly make some amendments to the website to make it even more accessible than it already is. So that's kind of all the things that we have prepared for today, and the next show and tell will be on the 3rd of September. Now, I think this is all you're going to hear from me, but if you have any questions, now is probably a good time to ask. So I'll just keep quiet for a few minutes and give everyone the chance to talk if you want to ask questions. Okay, sounds like no one has questions. Jazz, were you asking something in the chat? what was the name for a name service on the CSS slide.
You showed the different.
Yes, yeah. I asked the same question. It's basically people calling in asking for either talk to a specific person or a specific function of some sort. So it's like a switchboard type inquiry.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Any other questions? All right, I think that's all for today. Thank you very much, and hope to see you on 3rd of September.
Thanks, guys. Really interesting.